Their idea was that if you can create a simulated version of a place with enough sophistication, with enough fidelity, if you have enough information about it, then you can plug in changes, right, in your make it upsies universe. And then what happens as a result of that in this virtual environment will be very close to what happens in the real world. History is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. For many years, when we talk about big data, whatever your preference may be, we've often pointed out the imperfections of applying technology to predicting the actions of human beings. We've also, not for nothing, sort of internalized the cautionary tale of Minority Report, the idea that predicting crime, even when it seems to be accurate, can be dangerous and can have unintended consequences. Well, it happened. We're at the dawn of pre-crime right now. There's a great study came out of University of Chicago, which is frankly terrifying. These very clever researchers have created an algorithm that, according to them, can predict crime a week in advance with 90% accuracy. That's the headline. Before we go on, do you guys believe it?
What data are they using? What are they feeding into the thing? Is it, if it's social media?
Right.
Well, really, if it's social media posts that are private somehow, or really, I don't know, maybe they're public posts, but they're just monitoring specific things. I think you could probably predict some mass shooting events if you had the most granular data on everybody.
But, on social media, everyone's just portraying the rosiest version of their psychopathy. They want everyone to think they're the best, sweetest, happiest psycho in the world. Nothing on social media should be taken at face value, right? I'm kidding. Obviously, people use it for all kinds of reasons, but it makes me think of, there's an Atlanta rapper, and now I'm forgetting his name, but he got wrapped up in some gun charges recently.
Gunna?
I don't remember. I'll figure it out in a second. But the point is, and this might ring a bell for y'all, they used his lyrics as evidence against him, which obviously isn't the same as pre-crime. But I wonder if you could use that, as a form of pre-crime. Sure. If someone is rapping about something that maybe is a fantasy, or it indicates where their headspace is, maybe that's something you could use someone's art against them. That would be interesting.
It was Young Thug, by the way.
Young Thug, that's right.
Well,
Jeffrey.
Yeah. Is Young Thug. And there's a great, this happened to other performers too, other musicians. There's also a fantastic Key and Peele sketch about
I remember this.
I will send it to you all if you haven't seen it. Yes, yeah. I killed Darnell. It's like at 4:35, and but it shows that beautifully, right? But this is a good question. Where are they getting the information that they are feeding the algorithm? They are using publicly available data. So this would be reports of crimes. This would be any imaginable demographic metric of a community. What kind of stuff are we talking about? Just to give you a brief laundry list. This is pulled from the history of the city of Chicago, and they had two broad categories that they were testing the tool against. Once they fed all this junk into it, they wanted to see what they could predict. Their two buckets are: one, violent crimes, homicides, assaults, batteries, all of those, and then property crimes, burglary, theft, grand theft auto, all the hits. And these particular ones were used because they were most likely to be reported to police in those areas. Because as anyone who's lived, on the edges of different things knows, many crimes never have the police involved, right? And it's just sort of understood between the victim and the perpetrator. even when they switch sides in revenge schemes, you know. But they also said, okay, these are going to be reported in urban areas where there is historical distrust and lack of cooperation with Johnny Law. They thought, okay, even if you don't like the cops, you're still going to say, hey, someone stole my car. We know that because of that, there's a high likelihood that the number of crimes that have occurred in that regard is very close to the number of crimes that are reported, meaning the data is more solid, right? Especially more solid than something like drug crimes or some misdemeanor infractions, because those are prone to what's known as enforcement bias, which is exactly what it sounds like. We don't have to overthink it. So this the PhD senior author of the study, Ishanu Chattopadhyay, and pardon my mispronunciation if I'm getting this wrong, said that this was different because this tool is different because it takes in the complex social environment of cities. And it also considers the relationship between crime and the effects of police enforcement. It's pretty smart. It divides. So picture yourself playing like Sim City or Civilization or something. It divides the city of Chicago into tiles. They're pretty small, about 1,000 feet across, and it predicts crime within those areas instead of relying on traditional boundaries of like neighborhoods or political districts, because those are also subject to bias. It did this in Atlanta, in Austin, Detroit, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Portland, and San Francisco, in addition to Chicago. So they tested this in a couple of different places. And what they found, and what seems to be true, is that they can predict crime about a week in advance.
I don't understand.
So that, like, about a week in advance with 90% accuracy, they can take what happened in the past, and then through this algorithm, they can run it through this thing with all these other intervening variables that will say something along the lines of, hey, there are going to be X number of cars stolen next week, or something like that. I don't know how predictive they can be or how sophisticated. I don't know if they could say 2004 green Honda Odyssey, right, with a crappy transmission or anything like that.
Info on the people, like specific to the people, like psychological profiles or any information that's specific to individuals, or is it more big picture and like that's a really good point, Ben. Civilization or like SimCity, like a top down kind of view where the individuals are less important than just the complex system of it all, kind of.
I don't think it has that, right? We're just talking about the overlay of the city. Yeah. Right. You look at it like a grid, and like here's when things happen and exactly where within these little specific parts of the city. And I don't know. It's so weird because, Ben, I don't see how you can make it actionable. Like who cares if we know that 5 cars are going to get stolen in the next 7 days? Like, what do we?
If we don't talk about this a lot is on The Boys,
right? Do we put a cop in that tile?
The boys in that show, that like whatever the 7, they have these this department that's looking into crime, and someone makes a comment, they can usually predict a crime like a week or so before it happens. So, and it's similar kind of data that they're crunching. It also reminds me of this anime called Psychopaths that is more about the individuals, where they can actually, they're taking measurements of the citizens of Japan's biometrics of their brains and generating these, they call them cymatic scans, that allow them to, with a pretty high degree of certainty, predict who will be potential criminals. Criminality potential is the term they use, and they get color coded on a map. But this is not that. This is science fiction. Yeah.
But the dangerous, well, there's something very dangerous with all these things and their historical precedents, right? It's law enforcement throughout all civilizations. Various versions of law enforcement were attempting to predict crime, and their rubric for this, although it varied widely, it was hardly scientific, and most times it was really rooted in xenophobia, in racism, in some other form of discrimination, right? So the question is, how much of that has descended to this program? And if you look at the research just got published in Nature Human Behavior, and what they found was a twist to the plot, a Shyamalan twist, you could say. And I don't think he's that bad. But they found that this thing could accurately predict crime, especially in Chicago, but it also laid bare some heavy biases in police responses. They found stuff like if you stress the system, that's what the senior author calls it, it requires more resources to arrest more people in response to crime in a wealthy area. And that almost always draws police resources away from areas with lower socioeconomic status. So police are paying more attention to the quote unquote good parts of town. They're also working kind of in response to earlier experiments from Chicago PD or associated with Chicago Police Department. A while back, the Chicago PD tried another algorithm that created a list of people deemed most at risk of being involved in a shooting. And it turned out that over half of the black men in Chicago between 20 and 29 appeared on it. So this is why the people who made this new algorithm, this new AI algorithm, are really concerned that the data that they're using in their model may be biased, which therefore means, to your point, Matt, that the conclusions it creates will be biased. They also said that the algorithm, the AI, does not identify specific subjects, right? So it's not saying Paul Mission Control Decant is out on another loose diamond heist over at Zales or whatever is in your neck of the woods, folks. There used to be Shane Company here. The commercials were hilarious. Instead of identifying specific subjects, it identifies potential sites of crime. And they've released the data and the algorithm. They didn't keep it proprietary. They released it into the public sphere because they want other researchers to check out its reasoning, its conclusions. They want to test it. And then one thing that really caught me is I was comparing this to previous kind of DARPA work, or DARPA sponsored, work with creating virtual models of things like Afghanistan or other communities or other areas of the world, you could say. And their idea there, which was pretty frighteningly successful, their idea was that if you can create a simulated version of a place with enough sophistication, with enough fidelity, if you have enough information about it, then you can plug in changes, right, in your make it upsies universe. And then what happens as a result of that in this virtual environment will be very close to what happens in the real world with the same set of actions. So that's what they have done. They said, we've made this thing that is close enough to the actual city of Chicago or those 7 other cities for our purposes that when we feed it data from the past, it tells us what will happen in the future. Because like a Lovecraftian elder god, it sees beyond time. They didn't say that last part. I added that in for a little bit of editorial, style. But he also said it's not magical. It has limitations, quote, but we validated it and it works very, very well.